Good. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. We'll be starting in a few moments. Always great to see where everybody's coming from, isn't it?
Mm.
Mm. 308. Hello, Russia. Hello, Greece. Hello, Romania. Wow. Poland.
Ecuador.
Wow. It's amazing how far this goes, because we were focusing on Europe and the Middle East. So it's really impressive. It's very, very sunny here in Cambridge today. Hope you're enjoying the nice weather too.
I'm afraid that it's gone cloudy here and I've got some washing on the line, so I'm just hoping it doesn't start raining.
If you disappear, we'll know where you are.
Yeah.
Oh, my friend David Knox. Hello, David. This is David, somebody I used to teach with years ago in France.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's past. I think we'll wait a little bit more. We'll give it another minute or two. $472 now, Mark.
Mm-hmm. It's a pity we can't see them all on the screen, isn't it?
I know, I know.
It's a bit like talking to yourself sometimes with this webinar function.
It is hard to imagine. If we think back to our Cambridge days with absolutely huge rooms full of people, it seems like a distant past at the moment, doesn't it?
I noticed
we're making
that,
our way back there, aren't we?
I noticed that TESOL Spain is going to go online again next year.
Really?
They've decided today. They're not taking the risk even for 2022.
Gosh.
Mm.
So some people are asking whether they can, whether their cameras are on, but they're definitely not. We're in webinar mode, so only you can only see myself and Mark and our co-host Katie. Okay, so it is 4:32 in the UK, so I think we will make a start. Welcome, everybody. Great to have so many of you here from all over the world, as we've seen. And this is the second of our series of 4 webinars. Really, the webinars are all really all about tips, hints and advice from Cambridge to really support you with helping your students. We just today in the press in the UK, there's a lot of talk about disrupted learning and the effect that that's been having on students. So we thought that we would put together a series that would help you prepare and give them tips and advice for catching up over the summer. So Mark Hancock is going to talk to you today specifically about pronunciation. Mark is a teacher, a trainer and a materials writer, and he has over 30 years experience in the field of ELT. Mark has taught in Sudan, in Turkey, Brazil, Spain and the UK. And he's also written a number of Cambridge books with us. He's written Pronunciation Games, which was a photocopyable that you may have used. Pronunciation in Use, which is a fantastic series, really, really nice for students to work alone with. And more recently, Mark, we've just published Mark Hancock's 50 Tips for Teaching Pronunciation. So some of the examples that Mark uses today will be taken from those 3 titles. So I'm handing over to Mark now. Thank you so much, Mark.
Hello. Yes.
Just before you say, I'll just reiterate what I've written in the chat. Please do use, if you've got questions, use the Q&A box for questions so that they don't disappear in the chat, and then Mark will either answer them at the end, or if there's something that is the really burning question, perhaps we will let him have that question during the presentation. So chit chat in the chat, but questions in the Q&A box, please. Thank you. Sorry, Mark.
Yes. Can you stop the share there? And right. So yes, I'm Mark Hancock, and the talk is called Mazes, Maps, Rhymes and Raps. And I have to make a window through myself to see the rest of that. Pronunciation Made Practical by me, Mark Hancock. I've been an author of pronunciation books for I think the first one that I wrote was Pronunciation Games. That was in 1995 it came out. So I've been a little bit single-mindedly focused on pronunciation for a long time. And I'd like to boil that down today into 3 types of activities with very different objectives. So let me show you the 3 types. So yes, I've got mazes, maps, rhymes and raps. So that's 3 different types of activity. The first type, mazes, they are a kind of puzzle because part of pronunciation, strangely enough, isn't about speaking and listening and the mouth at all. It's about knowledge, it's about awareness. For example, the way that spelling is represented in pronunciation. So the first activity I want to show you then is an example of a maze. And here's a slogan. It's about thinking. Think it. The second activity is about maps. This type of activity is what we call an information gap. It's about communicating. It's about using pronunciation to make meaning. And I will focus on minimal pairs, which are a very important concept in pronunciation teaching, I believe. And then the third type of activity I want to talk about is rhymes and raps. And that includes any kind of text with wordplay, really. So it could be a song, it could be a rap, a chant, these kind of things. And I believe that the importance of them is more to do with hearing than speaking. And so I'll explain that a little bit later as well, about how these are good for connected speech. So basically, I've got about 10 minutes for each of those three activity types to demonstrate and explain, and also to show you how to make your own as well. So I hope you'll be able to make your own at the end of this session. So let me start off with a maze. Right. Let me just give a bit of background to this maze. As you know, there are more vowel sounds in English than there are vowel letters. So consequently, we have to be a little bit creative about how we represent vowel sounds using spelling. For there are 5 vowel letters, right? A, E, I, O, U. For each one of them, there are basically 2 principal pronunciations. The short, for example, A, as in plan, and the long, or the alphabet, the way it's pronounced in the alphabet, A, as in plain or plain. And the alphabet vowels in particular, they have at least 2 spellings, as you can see right here, with plain and plain, 2 alternative spellings of the same sound. And in fact, there are more spellings than 2. So it's quite an important area for students to get their heads around this, in particular with vowels, the correlation between sound and spelling. So the maze behind me here focuses on the A, the first letter of the alphabet, A, that sound, A. And the objective is to go from corner to corner. So you start off at A at the top here, and you have to go through to B at the end here. And you can go through a room only if the word has that vowel sound in it, that vowel phoneme, A. You've got a choice. In this case, you can either go to have, or you can go to gave. And let's see who can be the first to give the right answer in the chat box. Gave. All right. That was, the first was, I can't see the name of the first. Okay, never mind. So that was gave. And then after gave, you've got, obviously, you can go south to plain, or you can go east to white. Plain it is. And then plain again. And then rain and hate. Hate. And pays, wait, and finally, wait. And then you get to the end. That's the end of the maze. What you would do with this kind of activity is you get the students to do it, and then you go through the answers together, and then you focus on the different spellings. You can ask the students to find the different spellings of the sound A. The first example here, you've got A something E. This is sometimes called the magic E because it's not silent. It modifies the A, it changes it to A, gave. So this is these 2 letters are the spelling for the sound A. The same with this one. With this one, you've got the 2 letters A and I are the spelling for plain. you can actually see that plain and plain are actually homophones. They're exactly the same in pronunciation, despite the spelling being different. Sometimes I find that students don't believe that homophones exist. They believe that they can hear a difference between this and this. And so then I have to say, okay, which one am I saying? Plain. And then they find that it's impossible to distinguish between them. So there's two spellings. Are there any more spellings? Well, in fact, you've got the A-Y. That's another possible spelling. Instead of A-I, you can have A-Y, especially at the end of the word. As in this case, this is at the end of the word, it's got an extra morpheme, the S, but basically the root word ends with a Y. So usually when you have it at the end of a word, it's Y instead of I. And then one more spelling, which is the GH one. This is one of the weird, unusual spellings that you sometimes get that are really strange and unusual. So that's not so common. But so there are, what, 4 possible spellings in this game. Normally, I make the a maze slightly bigger than this. This maze here is 3 by 6. It's actually a shortened version of a longer maze, which is actually here in a book of mine here. This is in the 50 Tips book. This maze here is 6 by 6. That's the ideal size for a maze. This one is 3 by 3. I'm telling you this because I expect you to make your own. And here's how. Okay, so you take an empty grid like this, and then you write in the words of the correct root first, like this. So you put a continuous line of words with A in your grid. And then the final step is to fill in the rest of the rectangles with other words which are potential candidates, let's say, for the root, but that the students have to recognize don't have that sound in them. So they're quite easy to make. In fact, you can even get your students to make them as well for each other to do. So take an empty grid, put in the correct root, put in the distractors, and then give it to your friend to find the solution to the puzzle. Easy. So that was mazes. And I'd like to now move on to maps, and I'll show you an example. Okay, this is an example of what I'm calling a map, and it's based on the principle of a minimal pair. Let me explain what I mean by minimal pair. You can see here a sentence with two possibilities here, living and leaving. So I'm living with mum. I'm leaving with mum. I'm living with mum. I'm leaving with mum. With these 2 words, living and leaving, are identical except for one phoneme, the I or the E. So this is a classic example of a minimal pair. That's what a minimal pair is. Words which differ by one phoneme, which are easily confused. So the game behind me is a way of practicing with minimal pairs so that students get the experience of discovering that they can make a difference in meaning, that pronunciation is not just for decoration, it's about getting your meaning across. So I'll get a bigger picture view of this game so you can see it better. Here it is. And here's how it works. You've got 4 sentences with minimal pairs at the bottom here. I'm living with mum. I'm leaving with mum. Don't hit the plates. Don't heat the plates. Don't slip on the ice. Don't sleep on the ice. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? And the students have to listen and find out which destination at the top I'm going to. If I say the first option, I turn west. Second option, east. Right. So for example, you go to 1. Number 1, I'm living with mum. And I go west to number 2 here. And then don't heat the plates. Don't heat the plates. That's going east. So you go over there, east, up to number 3. Next one. Don't slip on the ice. Don't slip on the ice. That's another west, up to there. And finally, can you feel it? Can you feel it? Takes us to Moscow. That's how the game works. If you're going to use the game in class, make sure you explain how it works very carefully. It's surprising how easily students get confused by this. So maybe do just what I've done there a few times with your students first so that they understand exactly what they're supposed to do. And then you do it again, but without drawing, and the students simply listen. The students shouldn't say anything. They shouldn't respond in any way. They should simply listen and say which city you go to at the end. Here's how it starts. Number 1, I'm leaving with mum. Just listen, don't say anything. And when you get to the city, then you can write it in the chat box. Number 2, don't hit the plates. Number 3, don't sleep on the ice. Number 4, can you feel it? So people are going to Tokyo. Everyone's going to Tokyo. It's exactly where I intended you to go. That's perfect. This is a miracle of communication. Usually, not all of the students go to the right place, so you then need to work out what went wrong. And basically, this is not about correct or incorrect. It's about, did it work or not? So what I like most about this game is that it's self-correcting. You don't need to say, oh no, that's wrong or that's not correct. The students know when it works. They go to the same place as the speaker intended, or they go to a different place, in which case something went wrong, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just, it's clear that communication has broken down in some way. So this particular map here, which, by the way, all of the slides that you can see in this talk will be sent to you by email afterwards. But so you can use this particular map with any minimal pairs. It doesn't have to be these ones. It can be any minimal pairs. And once the students get used to it, it's very quick to set up. There is another version actually of map, which I could show you just a moment. This is another one that's very easy to make. here, you've got a street map, and I have to explain to you which place I want to go to. These are A, B, C, D, etc. These are all cafes, and you've got these streets. You've got Robe Street and Rope Street. You've got Tab Street and Tap Street, Rib Street and Rip Street. Yeah, so you can see that the town planner in this particular place has made it very, very difficult for learners to find the right place, because it's pretty tricky to distinguish between the P and the B, especially at the end of a word. So this is how it works. You simply have to say, it's on the corner of, and then you give the name of the streets. For example, if I say, it's on the corner of Robe Street and Tap Street. It's on the corner of Robe Street and Tap Street. You're going to see, yes, you're going to see. By the way, if your students are finding it really difficult to distinguish between tab and tap, there is another strategy apart from the consonant. You can also focus on the vowel sound, which is always a little bit shorter before the P, before the unvoiced one. So tap has a shorter sound than tab, tab, tap. Yeah, and these are really easy to make. You get an empty street grid and you write in the words which your students are finding difficulty with. So you can make your own versions of this really easily. Okay, now the final activity type I want to talk about is rhymes and raps. And here's an example of a rhyme look. It's simply two phrases. I was bitten by a kitten. I was bitten by a kitten. There's something about word play, playing with the sounds and rhythms of the language, which human beings throughout the world seem to enjoy. And this focus on the sound substance of the target language, in English in this case, is really appealing to students. And because it's wordplay, it's playing with the sounds of English, it's ideal for pronunciation work. So let me show you an example of a rhyme. Yeah. This one's actually from Pronunciation in Use. It goes like this. Mr. Porter loves his pasta. No one else can eat it faster. Mr. Porter's sister Rita buys the pasta by the meter. Mr. Porter's older daughter boils it all in tubs of water. So in this instance, you can see by the way I've used bold that there's alternation of stressed syllable and unstressed syllable. It's so regular that it makes it extremely noticeable to the students. It's very, very noticeable that all of those syllables in red are reduced. They actually have a schwa, the reduced vowel in them. So it makes, a rhyme like this makes certain features of pronunciation extremely evident to the students. Also, you can see the linking, for example, loves his pasta, where the H is probably going to be dropped, loves his pasta, so that loves is seems to join together like that, loves his pasta. So all of these features, connected speech, rhythm, and so on, are very evident in a rhyme. So you can use things like this. You can take it slow, do one line at a time, repeat after me, line by line. Mr. Porter loves his pasta. No one else can eat it faster. Mr. Porter, Sister Rita buys the pasta by the meter. Mr. Porter's older daughter boils it all in tubs of water. Yeah, you can do this online. It's probably better for the students to be muted, otherwise you can get a certain time delay over the internet, which might make it a little bit messy. But the thing about these things is not that the students are supposed to always use schwas and connected speech like I do, for example, because that's not essential for intelligibility. The most important thing about this is for listening, because it gets the student used to hearing this kind of pronunciation, which will make them better listeners. So I think the real importance about teaching connected speech is because it improves the students' listening skills. So don't expect them to start talking this way after you've been teaching this way, but it should help them with their listening. And once again, I have to insist that you can make your own rhymes and raps. Let me just show an example which I think it would be quite easy for anybody to make. This one be a lower level, because I see people have mentioned that this one might be B2 or B1 or B2, so it's a higher level. But here's a lower level one that you can probably make quite easily yourself. And it's simply a list of fruit: pears and peaches, figs and dates, oranges and kiwis, plums and grapes. It's got lots of interesting features there. You can see that the D of the and disappears. That's typical in normal speech. You can see that the plural endings of the fruits join onto the and. Pears and peaches, figs and dates. So you've got that linking going on. You've also got, and this is interesting, the three different ways in which the plural is pronounced. You've got the pears, you've got peaches with is, peaches is, and you've got the s of dates. So you can use it to focus on that feature of pronunciation as well. And it's not rocket science. Anybody can write a rhyme like this, I think. And if you want to make it musical, you can add some music. I've actually, when I wrote this, I was tempted to put it so that it would fit to the rhythm of that French traditional song, Frère Jacques. So like this: pears and peaches, figs and dates, oranges and kiwis, plums and grapes. So if you fancy doing a bit of singing, why not? Some people don't like singing, but there you go. It's optional, you don't have to do it. So that was it. 3 types of activity. And with that, that was all I was going to talk about. So thank you for listening to me. All these slides are going to come to you later. And now I'd like to take some questions, please.
I particularly enjoyed that song, Mark. Fantastic. Perhaps we can have another rendition before the end of the session. So, shall we have a few questions? Now, let's see. Somebody asked, first of all, if the maze covers all of the possible spellings for that sound.
No, I don't think it does, actually. I think there might be 1 or 2 outlying. I can't think right now, but I think there are 1 or 2 more spellings for that sound, because I was keeping that maze to quite a low level. So you might find at higher levels, you're going to find 1 or 2 outlying spellings. When you make your own, it's up to you to decide how complex you want to make it. You can keep it simple, just have 2 spellings if you want, or you can make it more complex, make it fit to the level of your students.
Okay, great. And then Jim asks, how can we deal with fosterized errors in pronunciation?
Well, first of all, errors is a strange thing because some aspects of your students' pronunciation are noticeably individual, or maybe from their L1, but it's not necessarily a problem. So if they have a feature of English which is actually imported from their L1, but it's not a problem for intelligibility, then I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it. You make students aware of it, but let them continue saying it the way they do. If it's problematic, if it's something that's indeed going to cause a misunderstanding, in that case, the first step is to prove to the students that it makes a difference. It's not just for decoration. So you need to find some kind of minimal pair example where what they're saying actually means something that they didn't intend. If you can find an example like that, it motivates highly for them to try and work out the difference. So I think the important thing is to motivate them to need to change.
Okay, excellent, thank you. How can we deal with students' mispronunciation during class discussions?
Once again, I have to say that if it's not affecting the intelligibility of them in the interaction, I wouldn't be interrupting. It depends if it's causing a lot of problems, and it depends what the purpose of the activity is. If your activity is to give them fluency practice, then it would be inappropriate to be stopping the progress of the activity to focus on the accuracy of their pronunciation. So it depends what the purpose of your activity is. If the activity is precisely to give you some diagnostics so you can work out what problems they have with pronunciation, then you might want to make a note of it and then go over those points at the end of the activity.
Okay, great. That sort of covers one of the other questions here that David had, which was about the difference between accent and pronunciation. And he was saying that his students in France have a real complex about their accent too. I think you've touched on that really now.
Okay.
How can I make learning phonetic symbols easy for students?
Well, firstly, I would have to say that it's not essential. First of all, consider the possibility of not teaching them phonetic symbols. In 50 Tips, I actually had a chapter on that very question, whether or not to teach them. And you could go either way. You could argue either way. It depends on the students, whether you're the only teacher or do they have other teachers, and do the other teachers teach it? How old are they? How long have they got? Is it an investment for the future, or do they need to learn something right now, fast? How urgent is their need? These kind of questions. So first of all, you need to work out if you're going to teach them. If you are, then I think you should use game and puzzle type activities which make it challenging and pleasurable in its own right. So, and maybe organize it so that not too many at a time. You can do them in small groups. For example, 3 or 4 vowel sounds form a neat group. You could teach that group. For example, E, I, and ia. There's 3 phonemes. You might do that in one session, and then the following week, some more. So little by little.
Okay. There are really lots of questions here in the Q&A box. There's one here that's quite topical, really. Carol saying, I'm interested that you recommend students mute their mics in an online class. Supposing it's an activity where you want to give feedback, do you have any tips for teaching pronunciation online with shy students who don't want to unmute? Tricky one.
Well, I guess, first of all, about using mute, if you can actually see your students, if it's for example, a Zoom room with the capacity for 25 or even 40, you can see your students. If you can see them, you can oftentimes tell if they're getting it or not just by looking at them. So that's one thing. If you have them all unmuted simultaneously, the result is usually a horrendous noise because the timing is not exactly synchronous across everyone's microphones. So you can have one or two unmuting and go around the class, alternating the volunteers, as it were. So everybody does it, but only one or two are audible, and share it around the class. If you are specifically wanting to feedback to one individual, then you would obviously have to get that individual to unmute. And if they're shy, you have the same problem as you would have in a face-to-face classroom. So how would you do that in a face-to-face classroom? You might do it whilst the rest are doing group work, or in breakout rooms in this case, if necessary. Actually, the online environment's quite good for shy students because it gives them cover. They're not so exposed. So I think it's actually, we might say there are benefits to online teaching, and that's one of them. Yeah,
absolutely. And then perhaps just one more question. Is it important to explain the tongue position in the mouth to students for production of certain sounds, do you think?
Yes. If the students are having problems, if they're not having any problem at all, then maybe just for their general awareness, it might be useful. But if they're having a problem, then how else are you going to do it? You've got to try all of the strategies you've got. One strategy is for you to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And if they're still getting it wrong, then what do you do? Repeat it again? No, I think you've got to try to work out what's going wrong, try to diagnose what the problem is, and then try to find a way of explaining it to the students. So yes, you need to be aware of those things yourself. I often use my hand here as a model of a tongue, and this would be the top teeth. So you can see if I could explain that when you're going to say the letter L, the end of the tongue has got to touch there. It's got to touch. It can't be near. It's got to be touching, but not at the sides, so that the air goes round the sides, for example. So try to explain by any means that you can, with diagrams, with technical stuff, or with something more artistic. Any which way you can. Try out different strategies, and if one doesn't work, try a different approach.
And actually in pronunciation in use, there is a section, isn't there, that actually has some illustrations and actually shows how
exactly
sounds are formed. Actually,
all of the units on sounds have a little diagram of the vocal tract. Yeah.
So that will be a good one to recommend.
It's good for them. It's good for them working on their own as well. The in use, because of that, the students can actually work on their own and see the picture of how to do it.
There have been a few questions actually asking for the titles of the books that you've mentioned, that you've used in examples. We will share those in the follow-up email. We'll also share in the follow-up email the link to the feedback form. When you complete the feedback form and send that in, we will then send you your certificate of attendance. There've been a lot of comments saying you hadn't received them from last week. My understanding was that they'd gone out on Monday, so I'm going to check back on that. But we will put the feedback form link again in the chat box for last week, and for this week you will get it by email in the follow-up. Okay, so apologies for people who are still waiting for that, but we'll send them through by the end of this week. sorry. And Ala has really insisted that we answer this question. Can we use the rhymes with teenagers, do you think?
Absolutely. Yes, of course you can. You can call it a rap if you like. That might work better. But yes.
Good idea. It's a very good idea. Yes. Okay. I think maybe we should wrap it up because it's 12 minutes past, but the chat box has been very, very active, and I think it's been a great session. People have found it very, very useful from what we can see. So yes, you can see now all the thank yous coming in. So thank you so much, Mark, for your time. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have a lovely evening or afternoon wherever you are, and we'll see you next week. We will share how to register for the last 2 webinars again in the follow-up email. Okay, so thank you everybody and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.